Hello again. So sometimes you might be looking for things online in terms of how you might be creative about folding a ribbon. And here is from Historic Costumes Library, a page on different types of ribbon folds that have been created in order to adorn hats. Probably 1800s, early 1900s vintage on this. And some of the folds look relatively simple, and there are some bead adornments here as well. And then some of the folds look a little bit more complicated. So this is in your notes so that you can reference it and just see what some of the folds look like. I do have this page in Blackboard. And here is something else that I came upon. This is a close-up of a surface treatment that was on a pillow. I happened to be in a store that had pillows, and this was one of the pillows that they had. So I took a picture of it and I said, that might be an interesting kind of a treatment to maybe present in the class. And so when I got home, I started experimenting. Again, I like to experiment on paper so I can figure out some of these things. And what I came up with was, if on the paper I would draw diagonal lines, then that's how this piece is actually constructed. And so I do have some diagonal lines drawn, and on the lines I would fold and wrap the paper around itself, and fold it again, and wrap the paper around itself, and fold again, and wrap the paper around itself. And so what this gave me was the pattern that was used to create the different fabric folds here. And I'm not sure how they actually attached it to the fabric, the background fabric, but you could work on the opposite side here and catch just the background fabric here, and that could hold it in place. So that's how that is made. And then some other places where I've been looking, and I'm seeing different types of ribbons that have been folded in place. And here we have our box pleat, where we took both centers of the box pleat and brought it to the center of the fabric base. So that's on this. Other areas where the ribbon has been gathered in place as well, or partially gathered. Something else that I thought was quite interesting were these squares that are created laying on top of the fabric. So a couple of other things that people have been doing with the ribbons. And I thought I would show you some other pieces here as well. In our introductory video, I showed you this smaller piece, and it's done with a box pleat, so we already know how to do the box pleat, and this is just folding it from opposite ends, or folding all four ends into a box shaped here, another square on top of the ribbon. And so, how can we do something like this? I'll do it with this other ribbon here that's wider. And so here we have our box pleat. And this is the one that relies on 2/3 the ribbon width and 1/3 the ribbon width, and then we do our folding and we can create this box pleat here on top of the surface of the ribbon. And instead of taking the opposite ends here and bringing them together to join them in the center, as we did with our little box pleated trim, here I'm taking the opposite ends of the square and folding them to the center, so it creates this kind of a shape. And of course, wherever you have that place in the center where you need to be doing some stitching, that's always an opportunity to embellish with some bead or sequin or a button. So we have that there. So box pleat and just folding the opposite ends to the center and then creating this kind of a shape. Or, as was done on this other little square here, where all the corners of the square were brought to the center and then created this kind of a shape instead. So it's up to you whatever shape or embellishment you would want with any of that. And the size, again, can be different than the dimensions that I'm using here. And another treatment on this ribbon is done with something called side pleats or knife pleats. And the way that those are done, it's really half of the box pleat. So here you would use half the measurement of whatever ribbon you're doing and create a pleat that you could stitch by machine or by hand, and then space it so that you have another pleat that just meets it on its stitching line, and measure out again, have the start of the next pleat so that you could have that spaced as well. And then here, taking the ends of either pleat, of each pleat, and bringing that to the center, so that what we have here is one side folded and the other side folded. And it would get tacked over here where they both meet at this end. And at this end, where the point is, you could put a bead. So maybe I'll put the pins in so you can see what the pleat looks like. So there's the pleat with the point resting on the ribbon, and it would be tacked in place over here, and you could put a bead right there at that point. And continue doing this, bringing the ends of your side pleat or knife pleat down to center, and you will create another point on your ribbon that can have a little bit of an embellishment of a bead. And that's what's been done on this piece. So, a couple of variations here on a theme. Now, this one, where we have the boxes or squares resting on top of the ribbon, I found that one rather interesting, so I had to figure that one out too. And the way that you can do that, and I'm going to do it with a piece of grosgrain ribbon here, and this ribbon happens to be 2 inches wide. And what you want to do is you want to put a marking on the ribbon. So I have one chalk mark here. And in order to create these kinds of squares that rest on top of the ribbon, I need to go out to make a pleat for each square that is 4 times the width of the ribbon. So here I have a ribbon that's 2 inches wide, and if I go out 4 times that length on the ribbon, I'll be out 8 inches. So from that first marking here, the first chalk marking, I've already marked out 8 inches, so I'm over here with my 8-inch measurement. And if I put a big pleat in this ribbon, matching both of those points or lines, my 8-inch and my 8-inch, and then you would stitch this by machine is probably best. So I'm matching my 2 chalk lines, and here's my big 8-inch pleat, 4 inches and 4 inches on a 2-inch wide fabric. And then the next thing that I want to do with this is lay the ribbon down flat, and I want to take one edge of the pleat here, and I want to fold it so that it lies down against that center line of the pleat. So one edge of the ribbon lying down next to the center line of the pleat, and I'm going to pin that in place. And do the same thing on the other side. This edge of the ribbon, and I'm going to lie it down next to the center line of the pleat, where the pleat is stitched in place. And I'll pin that in place as well. And then you can kind of see that the remaining part of this ribbon here is forming the square. So I'll pin that in place here too. And that's how you can create a square that's resting on the ribbon. It almost looks like it was cut out and placed on there, but it's really part of the ribbon. So, an interesting kind of a technique. And then if you're going to be spacing them so that they're right up next to one another, you're going to have to be playing a little bit with the spacing on this to come up with how you're going to be allowing space in between and what your measurements are going to be. But a couple of different techniques for how you might go about folding the ribbons in other ways. Okay, so I hope you have fun with ribbons, and I think it's best to use ribbons, although this is a piece of fabric that I used for this one and just folded it that way, but the edges are fraying, and so that's always a concern when you're using fabric. And ribbons, there's such a variety of ribbons that are available for purchase that I think you would find a ribbon that would work with your color scheme as well. Okay, hope you enjoyed this video.